wassalam ala rasulillahi. I welcome everyone to this session, which is the introductory session to reliance of the worshippers and professionals. It's a text that is composed by Sheikh Uthman Den Fodio in the scholarship of Timbuktu revival that we witnessed within the last 500 years or so. The Umda has some special qualities, and we'll talk about those qualities or the reliance uh, as a text. I'm calling it the reliance, but it's reliance of the worshippers and professionals. So when I call it the reliance, it's a name that I've given to the text for short. It has been selected as the focus text for the primer level in the Shokani study circle within the Maliki Fiqh track because of the qualities that it has and because of the philosophy that it represents at the practical and theoretical levels. It is a book that is written practically to bring the Quran and the Sunnah to the student of knowledge in the early phase of his or her studies in a manner that is simple so they can see how it is that the Quran and the Sunnah shapes the way that we practice and learn aspects of the Quran and the Sunnah that serve as the foundation and the basis for practice. And at the theoretical level, the text represents a revival in pedagogical thought or educational thought with how it is that we should be dealing with fiqh studies. Fiqh deals with the knowledge of the halal and the haram. Literally, one of the definitions for fiqh in the Arabic language means understanding. So it is technically the understanding of the scholars of Islam that was reached by systematic investigation with principles and research methodology. In other words, to understand how it is that we extract from the Quran and the Sunnah not only rulings but guidance, And we'll go a little more into the concept of fiqh overall. But for the time being, I wanted to introduce the study outline. Instead of calling it a syllabus, we call it a study outline. And if you notice, we talk about the Shawkani study circle as a study circle so that we keep the idea of progression and thought in place when it comes to learning. We wanted to take out some of the ideas that are there in Western institutions of learning. And that's why we say the study outline just to organize the study circle. And we talk about the study circle instead of calling this a course or a class. Uh, because the philosophy of education that we adopt in the Shokani study circle is a revivalist orientation with a great respect for tradition and a great regard for the call to recenter the Quran and the Sunnah, especially at the lower levels of knowledge, in the foundational levels of knowledge. And that has a series of discussions which are better clarified in the book, uh, The African Caliphate, which is a study of the life of Sheikh Uthman bin Fodi and his approach to education and what was taking place in the context of what was known as the Sudan at that time, not the country Sudan, but the West African region. There's also a reason why it's called the Shawkani Study Circle, because Imam Shawkani rahmatullahi alayhi represented a type of thinking in Islamic education which push to not just fall back on tradition, but to learn how to master tradition and to excel in our studies by taking on the discipline. And everyone is not going to reach that, but taking on the discipline of looking at knowledge as a path of mastery in which a person has to have a commitment to be not only committed to learning, but to embody excellence. Embody excellence. And Imam Shawkani rahmatullahi alayhi, he combined a lot of different elements that allow us to have a sense of balance, at least within the thinking of the study circle. That's part of why Shawkani is mentioned, Imam Muhammad bin Ali Shawkani, because he uh, push in between the concept of ijtihad and tradition, between hadith and usul al-fiqh, between ilm al-kalam and athari aqidah, between the importance of interdisciplinary work and the Arabic language. So you find that he allows us to work with tradition without having a lot of the hangups that we see uh, in some circles that have been heavily impacted by various tendencies that overtook Islamic education within the last 500 years or so. And that has a series of discussions that necessitate clarification and so on and so forth. But sufficient is what we said for the moment. We remind everyone that what is important in seeking knowledge is to have the proper intention. Remind myself and others. Intention in seeking knowledge is extremely important. And our aim in seeking knowledge, firstly, is to remove from ourselves ignorance, and we ask Allah for that and to facilitate for us. And secondly, to remove ignorance from the environment of the community, our families, and to serve the deen. And ultimately, the foundational intention is seeking the pleasure of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, to realize what's beneficial, to gain what's beneficial in this world and the hereafter. And there's going to be more lessons in that regard on the etiquette, the adab, the orientation of the student of knowledge. But in Islam, we have to keep in mind that the path of knowledge is so that we become better at being human beings in light of revelation. So that requires for us to keep the principle in mind uh, that the Quran highlights يا أيها الذين آمنوا لما تقولون ما لا تفعلون. And the Quran tells us, oh, you who believe, Why is it that you say that which you don't do? So the quality of the believer, which is not so easily reached so that it can be embodied, but it requires of us sacrifice, is to have integrity between what it is that we say and what it is that we do. How it is that we present ourselves in private and how it is that we present ourselves in public. So there's integrity between our deeds and our actions, and so that our deeds and our actions align. I mean, our speech and our action, so that our speech and our action aligns with the heart, and the heart is governed by iman in the most fundamental sense, and our actions or our limbs are governed by iman as well. So it's important that we keep that lesson. The other issue is that our character in speech and action and our comportment towards others should be at the highest level. Should be at the highest level. One of the qualities of Iman is brotherhood. And without that, we don't advance forward. With that said, let's move on to the orienting aspect or work that we have to do in this session, which is to orient ourselves to the study outline. On the first page, we encounter a section that's called Instructional Guideline Methodology. And it says this study circle will utilize a number of techniques to master the selected text for the primary level study in the Maliki Fiqh track, which is the Umdat al Muta'abidin, or the reliance of the worshippers. And part of the techniques, they'll be clarified more and more. Some of them are mentioned uh, in the study guide, but we'll talk about that with a little more detail, especially when we meet, which is going to be uh, organized at some point in time once we settle in. The other reality is that this study circle is set up where the student doesn't have to depend directly on being present in the class in order to get the material, but there is attendance requirements in order for us to truly benefit. There's no doubt about that. But at this level of knowledge, the attendance is important when we designate the days, and we have to coordinate that in our group. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't list it in the study outline as would be traditionally done if it were a syllabus, because we have to coordinate between schedules, and there's a number of students, and we have to figure out who's who. But the class is set up, or the halaqah or study circle is set up to in part be anachronistic, meaning that you can access the videos. I had to do this session live because I was having problems with uploading before, and it was supposed to be done at 6 o'clock this morning. So I'm behind schedule in that regard. But this will be the main place that the videos will be located, unless there's some sort of technical problem that would force us to utilize another platform. And that will be talked about in the Telegram group that is utilized principally to organize this class. Also, there's a WhatsApp group, and the WhatsApp group is strictly for student interaction, for questioning and discussing. The Telegram group is to organize the administrative stuff of the class, to put materials on and so on and so forth. The YouTube is to house the library of videos uh, that pertain to this study circle. So the techniques that we'll be using for studying would be to utilize these videos, which these videos will complement what's in the book. And the book is a primary text and a commentary. So I'll add on to things that are in the book to clarify and so on and so forth. That's the main framework for the way that the class is organized. There's some more technical points that we're going to encounter now. Firstly, as a preliminary note, it is not necessary to know Maliki fiqh or any other fiqh to participate in this study circle. The material that is covered are textual evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah, and thus are universal and can be used to advance your study regardless of the school of fiqh that you may be committed to, or that uh, you may be thinking about committing to, or you may not want to commit to. Secondly, it is important to follow the student expectations and communicate with me, right, regarding the expectations if there's an issue. The same goes for mastering the structural outline of the book, which is presented here in the study outline. You have to know the structure of the book because it's part of the learning technique to get an overall framework to understand what are the main themes that are being treated, that are being presented, that are being communicated, that will be studied. That framework, one of the reasons why I put it in the book, is part of my approach to teaching. Is part of the section which gets into the organizational structure of the book. In specific, is called the content structure of the book. We'll stop and we'll go into it right now, and then we'll go back to read where we were at from where we were at in the study circle outline. When we look at the content structure of the book, I have listed introduction, reason for why the text was composed, reason for why the book was composed. Then under that, you have the idea of Iman as a section of knowledge. Then it goes into the foundations of the deen, Tawheed, prophethood, transmitted knowledge. Well, just as those things that were said as an example, that what was just read off is telling you some things about what you're going to encounter in the book. Likewise, you should be able to tell us how is the book introduced. You should be able to tell us why was the book written. You should be able to tell us something about Tawheed, something about prophethood, something about transmitted knowledge. See what I'm saying? And then you should know that that's under the title of Usul al-Din. You should know what Usul al-Din is. You should know what Iman is in that sense. And then now we move on to another area of knowledge, external knowledge. There's another area of knowledge after that is called internal knowledge. This is based on the system that Usman Denfodio is using to classify knowledge. That which is foundational in the deen, and he calls that usul al-din. Mostly it deals with that which pertains to belief. External knowledge, that is what is usually known as the knowledge of fiqh, and or the actions that were responsible to perform, or the pillars of Islam. The reason why he calls it external knowledge is because he has another classification, which is internal knowledge, which is focusing on the life of the heart. This idea is rooted in the hadith of Jibril, in which Jibril talks about the deen as having three parts: Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. And he uses that same system to classify knowledge, which is very nice. I mean, scholars do it. Qadi Iyad has done it, but he does it very clearly. So you're very clear on what you're dealing with. And I mentioned this in the text. It it will come up. It will come up. I talk about this in little detail in the organizational structure of the book. But I went to the content structure to just give you a taste of why it's important to know the content structure. Because that content structure provides for you the material for examination, the material for assessment. You can assess yourself in that when you go to the content structure of the book, and the first thing you encounter is introduction, reason for the composition of the book or the text. You ask yourself, do I know why this book was written? Do I know why Sheikh Usman Danfodio wrote this book? If you're able to answer that question with clarity, and you should be able to answer that question with clarity by way of these uh, study circle sessions, and also by reading, and also by interacting within the WhatsApp group. You can ask the question, does anybody know? I read this, I heard this. You can ask the question. You should be able to answer that. The same thing when it comes to foundations of the deen, or the term usul al-din. You should be able to know what that is. Excuse me. Now, when we go to external knowledge, there's a section called tahara. You should know what the word tahara means, and it's going to come up. And under tahara, there's 5 areas of knowledge. The knowledge of what is pure water, why is it necessary? The knowledge of ghusl, what is ghusl? The knowledge of wudu, what is wudu? The knowledge of tayammum, I use the Arabic terms for these things. The only thing I didn't use the Arabic term for is the pure water and menstruation, which would be haid. For menstruation is called haid. But these 5 topics that pertain to tahara, the topic of what is pure water, why is it necessary, what constitutes pure water, what makes it impure, ghusl, wudu, what is tayammum, when is it allowable. We're not going to go into every detail, right? But it's a starting point. When you begin to know what pure water is, when you begin to know what ghusl is, wudu, tayammum, menstruation, here, remember that in this approach, we're dealing with ayat of the Quran and the Hadith. And remember, we said that this book is written in a certain way, and it will become clear to you the style of writing that you will encounter in the book and the way that knowledge is presented. One of the things that this book does not go into is a lot of detail, because the focus is not going on the details that the scholars have embellished or developed to clarify certain aspects of knowledge which pertain to a particular topic. Like the topic of purification can be broken up into various sub structures. I'm sorry, sub topics or themes, and the scholars go into detail with every one of those sub themes. Sheikh Uthman Den Fodio wants you to become familiar with what's foundational, what's the basis, what's the root, what's the source of why we say tahara or purification is important in Islam. And that goes back to it having its roots in the Quran and the Sunnah. What does the Quran and the Sunnah at the basic level say? So a lot of the details are not going to be presented now, but in the Maliki Fiqh track, they will be presented. But you starting off here with this framework in mind. So what this gives you is an understanding, for instance, Usul al-Din, some of the main things in Usul al-Din is that it talks about Tawheed, talks about prophethood, and it talks about transmitted knowledge, and that transmitted knowledge pertains to the unseen. That defines for you Usul al-Din. External knowledge, here it deals with purification, salah, zakat, fasting, hajj. Because of the way that this book is structured, he doesn't go into a lot of details for every cornerstone of knowledge or every pillar of knowledge that we're dealing with from the 5 pillars. He gives you what's essential. But what I want you to keep in mind is that the content structure is developing for you a framework on what is fiqh, on what is usul al-din, on what is fundamental in the science of purification of the heart. So once you have that outline in mind, what happens is that with time, you will fill it in more and more. So for instance, for usul al-din, you're going to know what's foundational, and then you're going to be able to get into details later on. Later on, you'll even get to the point, inshallah, to be able to say, well, in Tawheed, there's different genres of writing in Tawheed. There's different schools of thought in Tawheed, right? When it comes to prophethood, it's dealt with in this way, in that way. You, with time, you'll be able to move beyond just the basics. Salah, the same thing. In this track, the idea is to learn some evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah and some details from the Maliki school. But with time, you should be able to have an understanding that there's other schools of fiqh, there's other schools that investigate the Quran and the Sunnah, and they may come to different conclusions on certain things. And that's allowable. It's allowable because they're utilizing a methodology and principles, and they're focusing on evidence, and is recognized by the ummah as an approach. So the outline builds your mind. The outline allows you to test yourself. The outline is an introduction to these different areas of knowledge. For some of you, you may have experience already with this. But what the book does is it gives you some foundations in the Quran and the Sunnah. With that said, let's go back to the first section of the study guide. This study circle will utilize a number of techniques to master the selected text for the primer level study in the Maliki Fiqh track. Firstly, as a preliminary note, it's not necessary to have a background. The material that's covered will be universal regardless, but it also, regardless of your background, but it also will lay down a foundation for you to be able to enter into Maliki Fiqh. Secondly, it's important to follow the student expectations. They'll come up. We still didn't cover them yet. And to communicate with me regarding them, how you understand them, and if there's some issues with them, or if you're having difficulty. The same goes for mastering the structure outline of the book. I just talked about why it's important to master the structure outline of the book. It's going to be that which gives you a framework for understanding. It organizes your knowledge. It also is a point of reference for how you can assess, and I can assess, where you're at in your understanding. The aim and structure outline of the book is presented on pages 3 through 7. Uh, it not also helps the student to have a bird's eye view of the content of the book, so you kind of know what's going on in the book, versus getting a little bit of knowledge one week, then the next week you get another level of knowledge, then you don't have the big picture. You kind of get a big picture of what it is that you're going to be studying. But it also provides a study guide that details what your focus should be. The structure of content forces you to focus on these issues. Lastly, the student should be able to explain each point in the outline at the end when we finish this text. If the student focuses on being committed to the directive uh, given, I'm sorry, because when I wrote this pretty late, and I just realized that there's some spelling issues. On being committed to the directives given in the 6 student expectations and 6 principles to guide the study of this text. So there's 6 student expectations and 6 principles that you need to know for studying. They're listed. The study session, and we'll get into them. The study session will include videos to guide the study and scheduled group sessions to review the material. The videos will be uploaded to the Telegram and YouTube if necessary. If not, they'll be on the YouTube page, right? Not necessarily with both. Not necessarily both platforms are going to be used unless I have to or we have to. The study, uh, the student should read the text and watch and listen to the videos and take notes on any issue that comes up and refer issues to the teacher. Now, the organizational structure of the book. Sheikh Dan Fodia has organized his work around 3 major access points, and these serve as the foundations of the knowledge of the deen. We talked about that already. These access points are usul al-deen, external knowledge, internal knowledge. This is based on the hadith of Jibreel. All of the book is structured around those 3 areas. It's classified, the knowledge is classified. Usul al-deen, external knowledge, internal knowledge. You should have that in your mind that he's utilizing that frame. It is upon these 3 axes that he focuses his idea of Islamic education, that the foundational knowledge is rooted in usul al-din, external knowledge, internal knowledge. That's important. Why? Because the more you master knowledge, then you're able to understand, that there's levels to knowledge. So when you communicate, you're keeping in mind, you're conscious that we have an obligation to incrementally work with people at the level that they're at. We confuse this issue. So sometimes what's happening with us, because we're not trained as educators, what we're doing is that we're confusing the people in the approach that we're teaching. So that's why it's important to utilize this system, because Sheikh Usman Den Fodi, one of the things that he does really well is he speaks to people at the level of knowledge that he wants them to know. Right? So he's not confusing levels. He's creating a foundation for the student because he's implementing a certain educational philosophy. He wants a certain level of literacy to be in place. So that's important. So the brief description of this book. This work is not a comprehensive fiqh text. It doesn't cover every section in fiqh, right? But it covers the cornerstones. The cornerstones is what I utilize as the word for pillars, cornerstones of the deen, the arkan of the deen, which is the plural of the word roken, right? The cornerstone is roken or is pillar, right? And arkan is the plural for the word roken. So neither does this text plumb into the details. Doesn't go into details, and I mentioned that already. Other books go into details. When we look at this text, see this text here? See how wide it is? Just to show you. You see the difference? See the difference? This is an English translation of Al-Qalawi's explanation of Ibn Ashir. You see the details? See how detailed it is? You see how expansive it is? Here he's quoting from Mukhtasar Khalil. He's quoting from the Risala. These are higher level books. The Risala is an intermediate level book. It has become an intermediate level book. And Mukhtasar Khalil is one of the highest levels in the madhab. After that, you're just going into a lot of details. So here he has made Ibn Ashir, he raised the level up of Ibn Ashir. So he's going into details on issues. But still is only covering the cornerstones. You know, he's the Risala of Abi Zayd deals with marriage and business transactions and other sections or other areas of knowledge. Here he's only covering the 5 pillars, Ibn Ashir, but Al-Qalawi, who was from Mauritania, when he explains, he's going into a lot of detail, right? And he's quoting a lot of major books. In this text of Sheikh Uthman al Fodi, he does not do that. He's not going into a lot of details. And it's not good to go into a lot of details at this point because you end up drowning, right? And so that's important to know the quality of this book. So it's dealing with Aqidah at the very basic, foundational, non-controversial level. Salah, fasting, zakat. And also he's dealing with issues of spirituality or tazkiyat al-nafs. Some say tasawwuf. But in a very foundational, non-controversial way, right? So this approach, it facilitates memorization and understanding of the deen and is very similar to the way that the early generation acquired knowledge. They acquired knowledge in increments, and they were becoming familiar with the Quran and the Sunnah and how it applies to their life. They didn't go into a lot of details on issues. I have categorized this work as being in the second tier when compared to some of his popular works, the works that Uthman bin Fodi has written. Uh, and it could be maybe in the beginning still, but there's Umdat al-Bayan. Then I put this book, the Mirat al-Tullab and Umdat al-Ulama. From the books that are available, there's other books as well that he has written, but I left it at that. Mirat al-Tullab and Umdat al-Ulama. Mirat al-Tullab is more expensive. And Umdat al-Ulama as well, it covers more areas of fiqh. Mirat al-Tullab, or the Mirror of the Students, is more comprehensive. Is dealing with multiple areas of fiqh. Is more of what we would consider a complete fiqh book in the sense that it covers uh, a well-rounded spectrum of fiqh subjects, but it doesn't go deep either. It's dealing with evidences, though. The evidences, to unpack them, that's where you can go deep. But what he presents is just some fundamental evidences, and that's it. So we can talk about that if people have questions. I try to just kind of give you an idea of where this book fits in relation to his other books that are available online. We say here in the next 2 pages of this study guide, we introduce the overall outline structure of the book. The outline gives you an overall picture of the flow and content of the text, and that content is based on the 3 axis system that we mentioned: usul al-din, external knowledge, internal knowledge. Become familiar with this structure so that it settles in your mind, so you're able to outline this book without much thought. The outline itself is going to help you outline the book. Right? The outline serves as a study guide that will allow you to measure your mastery over the raw material of the text, as well as the explanation provided in the commentary, which gives some details, and that offered by the teacher in this case, which is me, or the facilitator, better said. The student will be provided 3 areas of focus for the study: the metan, or the text, the principal text, the written commentary, or what we call the sharh, and then the oral commentary, which is coming from me, which we call the taliqat. Questions for study, meaning I'm going to give you questions that you have to answer. That will be provided at the end of each video. So when I finish the oral commentary piece and dealing with the text, I'm going to ask questions. Those questions you should be able to answer. They're going to help you focus, because those questions will help recap and draw focus on what's essential in the lesson, right? And then we go over the content structure of the book. Briefly, the content structure of the book is the introduction, the reason why the book was compiled. Iman Usul al-Din is the first section of knowledge that you encounter. That consists of the Tawheed, prophet or transmitted knowledge. Then we go to external knowledge. That consists of Tahara, Salah, Zakat, fasting, Hajj. The most developed sections are Tahara and Salah. So in Tahara, you cover 5 areas. In Salah, you cover 6 areas. We already covered the areas in Tahara. I already told you the bullets, the topics in bullets: pure water, ghusl, wudu, tayammum, menstruation. Those are the subject areas. Then in Salah, the times of the Salah, the conditions of the Salah itself, making up missed prayers, sajdu sahu, or sajda sahu, or the prostration of forgetfulness, and Jummah prayer. Zakat, you deal with Zakat al-Fitr. You didn't do much in fasting or Hajj with a lot of details. Then the internal knowledge is much more detailed. The vices of the heart, and he brings up one social vice. So the vices of the heart, as the opposite being the opposite to virtues. The vices are conceit. Similar to that is arrogance, false hope, unwarranted anger, envy, showing off, greed, love of status and position. And then the social vice is, which is a destructive character, is having a bad opinion of other people. Then the virtues of the heart, which is repentance, God consciousness, or taqwa, patience, doing without, which is zuhud, reliance or tawakkul, resignation, right? Contentment, fear, and sending salawat on the Prophet. Then the social virtue is the opposite of the social vice, which is having compassion for people. Then the closing dua. The 6 expectations. What are the 6 expectations? The 6 expectations are the following: prepare before the study session, meaning read over, take notes, think about what you're reading. During the study session, be fully present. Do not multitask. Don't do multiple things. Focus when you're doing the study session. Review after the study session. It doesn't necessarily have to be right away, but review after the study session. So that is embodied in this book, that methodology is embodied in this book. which is instruction of the student. You prepare before the session, you're fully available during the session, when you watch the video, and when we meet, and then you review after the study session. That's the third expectation: review after the study session. Fourth, questioning should be specifically related to the material covered in the study session. Don't ask me about oranges. Don't ask me about the moon. Don't ask about anything else. Only the material that you're studying. That's part of disciplining the mind. Don't go off on tangents. We all do that, but we have to train ourselves. Review with your study partner if possible, which in the WhatsApp group you develop that, a study partner. Focus only on the text you are studying so that you can focus your attention. Don't focus on any other text. Focus only on this book in this subject area. Don't get caught up. It's easy to get distracted. You know, I'm a lover of books. I know myself. You can end up all over the place. Those are the 6 expectations. Now, the 6 principles to guide your study and move you towards mastery, learning in this level. 1, which is a task that requires commitment, which is to memorize just the basic text, which is basically going to be a hadith or a Quran or ayah from the Quran. And that's located at the top of the text, not the bottom of the text. Read the text out loud daily at the same time if possible, or when you can. Read it. Keep reading it. Keep reading the text. Veneration of learning includes veneration of one's companions in the quest for knowledge. I'm giving you an example. When you read out loud, you're listening, and when you read out loud, you're not only listening, but you're looking at the text. When you're looking at the text, it's going into your mind. When you're listening to it, the same thing. That's in addition to the other stuff. Write the text, even. Get a notebook and write the text out. Just the text. Write it out and read it out loud. Now you covered seeing it, hearing it, and now you're writing it, right? And so that's going to help you review. Write the text from memory if you're at that level. Write it from your mind. Recite it from your mind if possible as well. And we get to that level, inshallah. I would love to see that. I would be extremely happy to see that. And then attempt to explain the text after having read and studied the commentary. You go back and you explain the text. This means this, right? Those are the 6 principles that will move you toward mastery of the text. Review and comprehension assessment. There will be review sessions and a guided comprehension assessment based on the material solely, right? And the content structure part, it tells you basically what it is that we're studying. There's no guesswork here. There's no hidden stuff. That's important. The purpose of the review and assessment is to aid the student in mastery of the text and its comprehension. As far as certification is concerned, or some sort of certificate, those students that demonstrate mastery of the text will be given a certificate of participation and mastery and permission to teach the text according to the level that they mastered. Likewise, they'll be permitted to move to the next level, right? If they want to continue studying. Those who have not demonstrated mastery upon assessment will be asked to focus on building their understanding and offered other opportunities to go at it again. This is about mastery. This is not about getting a grade. This is about developing the skill. It's not about being punished. right? And so that with that we end the introduction to the study outline, people. Forgive me for some of the mistakes. As I mentioned, I was doing this at a late hour, and I didn't get a chance to completely do an editing of it, which I've seen now. I see what needs to be edited. But in any event, keep your intention for Allah. Be focused. Be disciplined. Be organized. That's important. That's important. And with life being hectic and so on and so forth, build in to your schedule time for this, inshallah. And I wish you all the best. I ask Allah to increase me and you in knowledge and practice, and that Allah accepts us, and that this becomes a means for us to be able to contribute back to the Ummah and to revive the knowledge of Islam, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.